The Veterinary Medical Board meeting. This is October 10th, and we will establish a quorum at this point.
Ms. Bowler.
Here.
Dr. Bradbury.
Here.
Ms. Laredo.
Here.
Dr. Nunez.
Here.
Ms. Prado.
Here.
Dr. Waterhouse.
Here.
Ms. Yanis is absent. Dr. Noland.
Yes, here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now we'd like to invite the members of the public to introduce themselves, if they so wish.
My name is Clayton Dumont. I'm here to introduce the DEC opening for a member of the public.
Great, thank you.
Good name, L'Oreal.
Alan Gersi with the Riverside County Department of Animal Services.
Cindy Savory, RDC, Sacramento Valley Vet Tech Association. Arnie Luke. And Carol, California RDC Association. Jimmy Matthews, the program manager with Maximus, and I'll be presenting to you.
Great, thank you very much. And having done that, then we'll go ahead and move to item number 13 on our agenda, overview of board's diversion program and role of Diversion Evaluation Committee, or the DEC.
Let's see. Can you hear me? There we go. And then I'll signal you when you've got them. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for giving me a few minutes on your agenda to talk to you about our program. We're proud of it, and I always love the opportunity to talk about it. We can go to the next slide. So this is me. I'm the project manager at Maximus. Have been with the program since 2007. So I have just about 12 years with working with this particular program. Go ahead. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the signs, symptoms, and impact of substance use in the workplace, and then I'm going to talk primarily about the diversion program and what the diversion evaluation committees are. I want you to know that Maximus currently serves 8 health professional licensing boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs. The largest that we work with is the Board of Nursing, and they have about 350 participants enrolled. Then we also have the Board of Pharmacy, Physical Therapy, Osteopathic, Physician Assistants, Dental Board, and Dental Hygiene Committee, and then, of course, the Veterinary Medical Board. We have just one veterinarian enrolled in our program right now. Healthcare professionals are at slightly higher risk of substance use disorder than the general public because of the easy accessibility, the familiarity with the medications, so there's sort of a minimizing of their effects in their minds, and so there tends to be more opportunity to use stronger substances. So with veterinarians, we tend to see controlled substances as the drug of choice. Some of the other boards, the Board of Nursing, same thing, we tend to see opioids, but with the physical therapists, we tend to see more alcohol because they have less access to the drugs that are in the hospitals. So the other important point to make is that the statistics show the general population has a relapse rate of somewhere between 60 and 90% in the first year, but our relapse rate in the program is 13% during the first 4 years of recovery. Most of those occurred during the first year, and most of the relapses that occurred in that first year were in the first 6 months. So that first 6 months to a year is a very, very sensitive period, and the participants struggle, getting on board, and anybody who's entering into recovery has those same struggles. But we have a good relapse rate for our programs. That tends to be, back up on that for just a minute, that's okay. That tends to be consistent with other states. There are a few other states that also track relapse rates. 44 states have programs like this across the country, but they don't all track their rate of relapse. So those that do, we've compared some of our numbers, and that's pretty consistent with the other states. Okay. Other way. I put up here for you the legislative intent. It's similar across all of the boards that have programs like this. The legislature wanted a program that could seek the ways and means to identify and rehabilitate healthcare professionals, in this case the veterinarians and the registered veterinary technicians, with impairment due to abuse of dangerous drugs or alcohol. Some of the other boards also work with mental illness. That is not in the legislative statute for the veterinary board. Certainly, many people with substance use disorders have a co-occurring disorder of mental illness as well. It's not uncommon to find that at all, but we're focusing more on the substance use in our program. And the primary goal is protection of the public. That's our first priority. And we do that through identifying and then working with and monitoring, coaching the participants in the program so that they can return to practice safely. Go ahead. Oh, well, I just said what I said. Okay, we'll move on. So who is in the diversion program? We work around the participant. We have the board and its regulations and statutes. We have connection with the board, working with the program manager. Yes.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
When you said mental illness, that includes depression?
Yes.
So Maximus does or does not deal with people with depression?
Some boards specifically. So if someone were to come in, for example, in nursing that did not have a substance use disorder but did have bipolar disorder that was affecting their practice, we could work with them. For the veterinary board, it's limited to substance use disorder, but many people have co-occurring disorders, and we certainly work with them if they do.
You have that capability?
Yeah, we just don't single them out, working just with their mental illness if it exists.
For any board?
Some boards, yes. Dental board, nursing board, we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So just because we don't mandate that, if they had that issue as a veterinarian, would you still be able to help them with that, or you would be prohibited from that because that's not what we're sending them to you for?
I'm not really clear on that answer. I've had, might defer to legal counsel for that. I'm not sure, actually.
Well, I'm not legal counsel, but I think it would also have to be in our contract, and it's not currently in our contract, and we're in the process of getting a new contract signed. So right now, it's because it's not in the contract. It's not something that they would be.
Issue.
I agree.
Yeah. And many, I don't remember the statistic, but it's high. Many people with substance use disorder have a co-occurring mental illness. And so we certainly wouldn't exclude them, and we wouldn't ignore the issues. We would work with it. Yeah. Again, there's Maximus. We're the administrative vendor. We have all of our participants attending support groups, so those facilitators are key to us. They see our participants once or twice a week, depending on how often we've required them to attend those groups. The Diversion Evaluation Committee that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, the drug testing and the collection sites are key components. And then when our participants return to work, they have to identify a monitor in the workplace, so a worksite monitor that sees them at a minimum of once a week or more frequently and has eyes on in their practice. So we work with them pretty closely too. Go ahead. So I'm going to walk through the process a little bit of how to come into our program. The application process, we can have either a board referral or a self-referral. Self-referral is someone who just contacts us and says they think they have a problem they'd like to join. Board referral is the participant has been notified by the board that there's a complaint. I think, I'm sorry, I'm not sure about this, but with the veterinary board, I don't think probationers are referred into the program. Do you know if that's true? In this case, and in the case of nursing, they're distinctly separate tracks. So it's truly an alternative to discipline program. Yeah, nursing and this one is the traditional alternative to discipline. So if they come into this program, any disciplinary process is on hold. If they're referred in as a part of probation, it's considered they stay the revocation of the license and refer them into the program, and that stays that way as long as they're successfully participating in the program. In this board, that's not the case. We don't get the probation referrals. Go ahead.
Why wouldn't we want to do that? Send probationers to...
It's up to the board. It's a great idea. It's something that the board would want to consider.
Is that another contract issue, or?
So it's in those cases that we work with the boards with the probationers, it's a supplement to what the probationary monitors are doing, or the folks are doing on that side, and we're monitoring more of the substance use piece, the drug testing, and with more of a clinical focus. And our focus is recovery, where the focus of the probation is disciplinary. So there's a bit of a difference in how we work with them.
Would that would cost the individual probationer, I suppose, additional funds? Or it costs the vet, I don't know.
Yeah, the flat rate right now is $2,000 for the entirety of the program, and then we pay roughly $16,000 if it's a 3-year, because it's a minimum of 3 year to enter into the program.
Oh, that's right, okay.
So it's incredibly expensive.
Wow, okay,
To do.
got it.
So.
Thank you.
It's a voluntary program, and so individuals entering the program must make a formal request to join the program. And then there's an agreement that they sign that contains all of the terms of participation. So they've agreed and voluntarily requested to be a part of it. The participant is enrolled in cases of here and in nursing. I think it's the same here. The investigation is set aside as long as the participant remains compliant if there's been an investigation started. And in all cases, the board is aware that the participants in the program and the cases are managed the same way, regardless of how the referral comes through. It's seamless. Go ahead. The initial steps in the program are case managers do an intake assessment, which is by phone, takes about 2 hours. All of our case managers are registered nurses or licensed clinicians, so they have that clinical focus and they do that intake assessment focusing on the substance use. We then send the participant out for a face-to-face clinical assessment with a clinical assessor in the community, a licensed clinician. We pay for that. The applicant doesn't pay for it unless they're a no-show, and then we do charge them for it. But it supplements what we do on the phone and kind of validates what we've interpreted without having a face-to-face. So they actually see them. They do get our intake assessment prior to their appointment, so they know what they're looking for and they know what we've seen, and then they look to make sure that it matches up. Many cases, when a participant comes into our program, we recommend entry into treatment right away. It depends on what their situation is. So if they come in and they've been actively using and maybe they say to us, well, I've just run out of my supply, we know that they need to go into detox right away. And so we'll assist them to find a program that either matches their insurance or that they can pay for. We'll get them into detox. We are not a treatment provider, so we oversee the treatment and we help them find the appropriate level of treatment, but we don't provide the treatment. And then we remove them from work until they're determined to be safe to practice. So we work with the board on that one. Once they're in the program and they're registered, we require them to attend community support groups. That's typically NA or AA, and if someone has an opposition to that, we do look at some of the other non-12-step support groups that are available in the community, except it has to be abstinence-based because we are an abstinence-based program. So there are some groups out there that tell the participants that they can use in moderation and that they don't have to remain abstinent, and we don't allow that kind of participation. They also attend a peer support group once a week. It's led by a licensed therapist. Some boards require twice a week. This board is just once. They require the participants submit a monthly self-report to us. We have an online system for them, and they can do it online. And then they have to call the case manager weekly to check in until they're seen by their first committee, and then they call monthly. So we're not just getting a written report from them, but we're listening to how they sound and, you know, whether they're making sense or whether they're slurring their words. You know, and then we go through with them just a real quick review of everything they're doing right now and any changes in their case. Go ahead. The random drug testing is a key component of what we do, and the California program, the labs call it the California panel because it's more sensitive and more, what's the word I want? It has more variety of substances than most of the other states that have programs like this. So we have a very extensive panel. So the participants are required to enroll in random drug testing with this. We use a third-party vendor, and they have to enroll within 48 hours. They check in daily. They have a mobile app, or they can check in online, or they can check in by phone. It'll all work. They must test the same day they're selected, and that's to avoid the opportunity to maybe try to cleanse their system or allow something to metabolize out of their system. If they were to wait a day or two, we might lose that opportunity. So if they're selected that day, they must test that day. The selection is computer-generated random testing dates. We have the ability to add a test if we think there's a reason to, but if we have any suspicions or they've had a positive result or they've missed a call, we can add tests. But other than that, we don't make changes to the testing schedule unless we've consulted with the board or with a committee member. We mostly do urine testing, but we also do hair and blood testing. That hair testing has 12 substances on it, has a 3-month window of detection approximately. The urine testing includes what's called a PETH, P-E-T-H, which is phosphatidylethanol, which tests for a metabolite of alcohol and has about a 3-week window of detection. Most people aren't aware of those tests, and especially with the alcohol, think that it's what we've traditionally known as blood alcohol levels, that immediate breathalyzer kind of thing, and detects immediate impairment. Since we're an abstinence-based program, though, it doesn't matter if it's not in the moment. If there's any evidence of it over the last 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, we want to know that too. So we use those more sensitive tests. The ETG ETS is ethyl glucuronide, and that tests for another metabolite of alcohol in the urine. They call it a biomarker, and that has about a 3-day window of detection. So that blood alcohol might be negative within a few hours, but we have this additional 3-day window of detection for alcohol. And we're not currently using breath, sweat, saliva, or SoberLink, although some boards and probation groups are now starting to use SoberLink, and it's available to us, and we're actually testing it right now to test whether you can cheat it or how sensitive it is. It's a breathalyzer that the participant is issued and stays with them, and then they're given direction of when to test, and that can be randomized, or it can be, if they're working, you might want to do it at the beginning, middle, and end of the shift. It only tests for alcohol, so it's only really appropriate for someone who has alcohol as an issue. But we found in just our playing around with it and our piloting it that it's very sensitive, and it doesn't. If you have any kind of a positive result, it requires you to test every 15 minutes until it's negative. And if you fail that, if you don't want to test because you know it's going to keep coming positive, it reports that to us too. So it's pretty effective. Go ahead. Yeah.
If you're doing it at work, how do you know you just don't ask somebody else to breathe into it?
Because it has a camera on it, and it has facial recognition software. So we've tried to cheat that too. We tried it with sunglasses and put our hands like this over the tube, and it still identified us.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty high tech. So go ahead. Any questions about the drug testing? That's a big piece of what we do. Participants must apply to the DEC to return to work. In reality, they can return to work without attending a DEC meeting if they've been assessed and determined to be safe to return to work, and then we'll work with the board on that or with the committee members. But they're evaluated for readiness by looking at how they're compliant with the program requirements, whether they've been having negative drug test results. The uniform standards require 30 days of negative results before returning to work, but I know that this board's not working within those uniform standards.
We will be.
You will be. Okay, so then we will move into that 30 days of negative tests to return to work, which in reality takes about 45 days because they need to register and then get that first test to happen. And then the support group facilitator that's been seeing them face-to-face every week, we get a report from them and whether they feel they're ready to return to work, and then the participant's own readiness. And sometimes they know they're not ready, so we kind of go based on how they feel as well. Go ahead. When a job is offered, see, I tried to find veterinary type pictures for you there. When a job is offered, they must identify a worksite monitor. That wouldn't be the horse, that would be somebody else who's equally licensed and must agree to see them a minimum of once a week. They must have the same level of licensure. We prefer it to be a supervisor because veterinarians, physicians, dentists tend to be in private practice. or in their own solo practice, that's not always possible to have a supervisor. So we can work with maybe another veterinarian in the community that agrees to come in, and then we'll work with an office manager as a secondary worksite monitor. So if there's ever any issue in the day-to-day, they can report it to us, but that we also want somebody kind of overseeing their practice and making sure that what they're doing is within their scope of practice and is safe. So they provide that contact information to us. We have an orientation with the worksite monitor where we explain what's required in the program and how to contact us and how to identify whether they may be impaired. And then they sign an attestation and agreement telling us that they've had this training and that they understand what their the expectations of the role. So we do all of that before someone can start working again. Go ahead. They must also show us the organizational chart to show us that the worksite monitor is one step above. Again, the board can waive that if they're in solo practice and don't have that option. We also look at a job description to make sure that it's within the restrictions on practice. Typically with this board, we don't restrict. That might apply to other boards where for example, nursing will return them to practice in a non-patient care position. So something like a telephone advice nurse or a utilization review or case manager where they don't have direct hands-on. We can't really do that with this board. So when they return to work, they're returning with full privileges typically. Go ahead. The cost of the program, the intake assessment is no charge. The clinical assessment is no charge, except, as I mentioned, if they are a no-show. The program administrative fee, veterinarians, it's a $2,000 one-time fee, which they can opt to pay in installments. The statute allows for $4,000, but the regs are set at $2,000, so that's what we're charging, and then the board compensates us for the balance of that. Our current monthly fee is, it's actually $380 a month now. That was written before we had our January change. I'm sorry, our July change in fee, but it's so that the difference in that amount over time is what the board pays. And then just for reference, the other boards are up there and what they pay. So you do have some options, and you would want to consider that if you want to look at the fees. The physician assistants, physical therapists, and osteopathic physicians all pay the full administrative fee, and the board doesn't pay any part of it. So nursing, they pay $25 and the board pays the balance. So pharmacists and dentists, it's $100. So it varies, yes.
Is it the same price for our RVTs,
Yes.
registered veterinary technicians, as the veterinarians, one-time fee?
Yeah, all the price across the board is the same. The services are the same across the board. Go ahead. They're required to attend support group. The cost of the support group varies. I think that's a typo because it's because these participants are required to go to a support group led by a therapist. They tend to charge more. It's probably more like $200 to $300 a month. Their cost of health care is the responsibility of the participant. That varies depending on what level of care they're required to go to and whether they have insurance that covers part of it or whether they're going to a program that has a sliding scale. So all of that is the responsibility of the participant. The random drug testing is expensive. The per test fee is $62.50 plus the cost of collection. As Jessica mentioned, they've just released the request for proposal for the contract going forward. Our contract expires at the end of this year, in December 31st. The new contract starts January 1st. So regardless of whether we pick up the contract again, which we're certainly hoping for, or whether it's another vendor, the cost of testing is going to remain the same, and that's been stated in the RFP. So it's $62.50 a test or less, plus the cost of collection. And that's for the urine test with the full test panel. Hair tests, blood tests cost more. The blood test is, I think, $112, and the hair test, I think, is $250, plus the cost of collection. But we don't use those very often. We use them for cause, or we use them on intake and just before a participant graduates to make sure that we haven't missed anything on the urine testing. Yes.
How much are collection fees
That varies also. It just depends on where they go for the collection. So we encourage them to talk to each other about that in the support group, so they know which collection sites are charging lower fees and where there's less of a wait time and that sort of thing. So it can be, I think on average, it's somewhere around $35, but it can be as high on a holiday or on a Sunday of $120 or $150.
Wow.
Depends also on whether they're doing hair, blood, or urine collection.
So they're doing about $100 a test or something like that?
It averages about $100 a test. That's generally what we say, on average about 100. All tests, all urine drug tests are observed collections, following the Federal Department of Transportation guidelines, and so they tend to charge more for that observed collection. It has to be with the same gender collector. And sometimes the participant will show up at a collection site and there isn't anyone working that's the same gender, and so they have to do some problem solving and figure out what to do. And we'll help them figure that out too. Go ahead. So after 2 years of good compliance and negative drug tests, the participant is put on transition. They have to apply for it. We call it petitioning for transition, and they do an essay that looks at their lives from childhood forward and what influenced them to get into substance use, and how did it turn into an addictive disorder, and what have they discovered in recovery, what are they seeing in their lives going forward, what have they learned so far, and they also have to develop a relapse prevention plan for the specific issues in their lives that might be triggers for relapse, because during this period of transition, we're backing off on the monitoring component. And we don't require them to go to support groups. We don't require them to prove that they've gone to 12-step meetings. And so they're now becoming accountable to themselves for those pieces of their recovery. And so we're making sure that they're ready for that through the petition process. Go ahead. The successful completion criteria: they have to demonstrate a manner of living that supports ongoing recovery, have proof of negative drug tests, again, 2 years plus that transition year, no other evidence of relapse within 24 months of the completion date, and have completed at least 3 years of satisfactory participation. This is a diversion evaluation committee. It's a nursing group because we just happen to have the picture in our files, but this is really what they look like. Our documentation is all available through a web-based application. So the committee members bring their laptop to the meeting and they're able to look at the participants' files in real time. And the report that they use gets updated in real time, so they have current and accurate information. The DEC model is unique to California, and 5 of the 8 boards use that. I think it's an incredibly effective model. It allows, we've looked it over and found that it about 150 to 200 years of experience around the table interviewing and talking to the participant. So everybody around the table, appointed by you, appointed by the board, is typically in recovery or working in the field. And so they understand substance use disorder, they understand the changes in the brain and the changes in behavior that come along with that, and they're able to recognize and identify whether someone really is working a program of recovery or if they're just kind of giving us the line of story that they want us to hear. So it's a very, very effective process. They formulate the participant's ongoing recovery plan, review requests to change, so when a person wants to return to work, when they want to reduce their meeting frequency, we start them out at daily meetings for the 12-step meetings, and then they can request from the committee to reduce that. And 3 meetings annually for the veterinary board. They meet currently in the office, at the Maximus offices in Folsom. We're open to changing that, but that seems to work for our group right now. And it follows the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requirements, so it has to be posted. We can't change location, we can't change the agenda, all of those things that you're familiar with for the open meeting. Yes.
So how many locations do you have in California, just in case we have people from other?
Yeah, the single participant that we have in the program is actually from Southern California, We use a state building in Riverside where we meet. We use a hotel near LAX for some of the nursing groups. We use a hotel in Irvine. We meet in San Jose. We meet in a hotel there. We meet near Fresno in a hotel.
So there's a
we
lot of
have
different areas.
options
Okay.
throughout the state.
And then the Open Meetings Act, I guess I would be concerned, like a lot of, AA is anonymous. Like, are we talking about people in an anonymous manner when
No.
they, or?
We go into closed session when we talk
Okay.
about the participants specifically. So we start the meeting, open it to the public, just like you do. Are there any comments from the public or anything not on the agenda? And then we close the meeting and go into closed session.
And to clarify too, while you have all those locations, you've only done Folsom for our board,
The
right?
Veterinary Board, yes.
Okay.
But we,
Right.
if
We can
someone
change
came to
it.
me and requested a change, we could
Okay,
accommodate that.
thank you.
And I just wanted to quick point out the typo in Bagley, Keene.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just in honor of Bill Bagley.
Yes, I'll make sure that gets corrected. Any other questions about the committee meeting? Because that was pretty quick, and I know that that's an important piece for you. All the committee members are appointed by the board. Yes.
I guess I can come up with a few more. So do they work, like, outside of those meetings, if they have questions, you guys are available to talk to them, and
Yes.
they're sort of involved in the whole process throughout the
Yes.
year? Okay.
So they're assigned a primary committee member as their identified deck consultant. And so if anything comes up, say we get a positive test result, we call the deck consultant and go over the case with them and talk about what the plan is for remediation. Where do we go from here?
And do you guys, like, have educational things where for your staff that the DEC members, like, ever go to, like, continuing education stuff?
We don't, but we can. The labs that we work with offer us, in this room actually, an annual training that looks at not only drug testing, but also substance use disorder, changes in the field, updates and things like that. And we haven't invited the DEC members, but we could.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yes.
I had a question. You started out by saying that if the board receives a complaint that a person's a substance abuser, they can enlist in this program and then the investigation is suspended while they're in this program, or?
No, the investigation is completed and then not acted upon, is my understanding.
So they receive the complaint and then determine that they're a substance abuser, and then they have the ability to rebut or not, but before discipline, they have this option? Is that how, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I can try. It really depends. By the time it gets to us, if there's already clear evidence that the individual was practicing to the level where someone felt the need to bring it to our attention.
And that's like a medical provider or a?
Or if staff called us and said that they're practicing while under the influence, then we'll move forward with our investigation and do discipline. Since I've been here, I'm not aware of any situation to where once it comes to that level that we've said, nope, we're closing this and deferring them to Maximus. I don't know about the past, but I would be concerned about doing that. What you could do is we go to the whole process, we investigate, we determine, yes, this is an issue, and then we could stipulate to put them into diversion. That would be a probation term to do diversion. That diversion would have to comply with the uniform standards, which Maximus is doing. But it wouldn't be in lieu of discipline. It would be a probation violation if they fell out of the system, and we would take action that way.
So an investigation can be started if they have a conviction of substance abuse, if there's like a medical diagnosis of substance abuse, or if just any random staff member says that you're a drug user.
We can investigate. That doesn't mean that we're actually going to make the same conclusion. But if we get complaints from staff saying they're concerned because this person is practicing while under the influence, then we typically do an investigation, which means we send DFI out. They either do an undercover, they go and interview witnesses, and we get all the information to determine how to move forward.
And then at what point does it go on the website that they're under investigation?
No, all investigations they're not public. It would be only if we take action.
Okay.
So if, for instance, a person was a substance abuser and they did get let go from work, and there was a complaint, but nothing had been acted upon, and then they decided to contact the board, they would be eligible for this program?
Yeah, so if they've contacted the board on their own, or someone else has convinced this person outside the board to enter into the program, that's an anonymous program, and they don't tell us who's in this program.
Okay, and then that would be mitigating circumstances when we're going through the investigation. When we have like stipulated agreements and all of these probation terms, this seems like a really great program that has a high success rate. Can we let them know about this program, and then they could, all the costs and those stipulated agreements are on the respondents, so maybe they would still be able to pay for it on their own, but it would be sort of not a board issued thing. Is this something that we tell them about as an option for treatment? It just seems like a very good program. So.
It is a very good program. My concern is once it rises to the level of discipline to where we know it's impacting the practice, to do something other than discipline, it would be more like...
I don't mean that. I mean, like, they meet a lot of the criteria that we're asking for. So if they were, like, just so that we could let them know that, hey, this is a program that actually works. This is one of your options that would meet these parts of your agreement plus whatever else we're doing.
Yeah, what I would actually like to see is a lot more outreach, getting more people aware of this program. So before it rises to a discipline level, they know that this program exists. Before we do that, though, we have to kind of right our ship as far as funds go, and clear that up, and then we can do an outreach campaign that DC can help us with. BRN recently did a really good wellness campaign to promote this program, and I think it was very successful. I would like to do something similar.
And we can help with that as well, and we'll do outreach as part of our agreement with you without charging you.
And just the last thing is, when we're doing the contract, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it, but can we talk about adding in the mental health stuff, just since that is such a big problem in veterinary medicine, and it seems like that would be, does that add a lot to the cost?
No, it doesn't change the cost at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we work on it? Okay, thank you.
We have, how many do we have? One. Okay. And if we did do an outreach program, more preventative than anything else, for if a practitioner chose to engage and enroll in Maximus, would the board need to cover the additional $16,000 and all that stuff?
Yeah, so currently,
always?
Because that's an issue that we have in Sunset, is to do the monthly cost. So I would recommend doing the full administrative cost, which was it's moved to $380. A month or a year? A month. So it moved to $380 a month. Because right now, since it's $2,000, if the minimum is three-year program, that equates out to roughly $18,000. So we're covering $16,000, but it even increases if the person isn't successful within that 3 years.
Right.
And it's extended, then the costs continue to grow.
So that's a drain. That is a board resource.
It's extremely expensive.
Unfortunate. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. If a veterinarian or an RVT voluntarily enrolls in this program, how does that impact their license status with us?
So if they're in the program and we don't know, then they're not telling us how they're doing. But if they're in the program, they they have the ability to, in order to stay in the program, they tell them that they can't practice, and they work with them on that. And when they let them know when they're able to return to practice.
And so if they're practicing against your recommendations, then we are notified, or?
That would be grounds for closure from our program.
Okay. So we know one person is in there, but we don't know who that is. Is that how that is the standing right now?
The board is aware of him.
So we keep it separate from enforcement. So our licensing manager is actually overseeing that program. So the board as a whole, yes, we know, but we want to keep them separate.
And there's nothing on the board's website that indicates they're in this program. Nothing reflects on their license. Yes.
Do you happen to know, I'm just curious, what the medical board does? I noticed they weren't on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have a program yet. Their program was closed through the sunset process in 2009, I think. I might be off by a year, but I think it was 2009. And so they haven't had a program since then.
For 10 years.
They recently.
For 10 years.
10 years. They recently, there was some legislation that passed 2 years ago that requires them to reconstitute a program, and they've been working on their own regulations and the requirements of that program. So nothing is happening yet in terms of contract, but I understand they're moving forward.
Okay, so we have one participant. How many participants are there from the whole 8 boards?
Yeah, that's what I was.
There's about 450 participants total.
Wow. So do you do only those people, or do you have other participants outside of those boards?
No, only those boards.
Okay.
Nursing's the largest. Nursing's about 75% of that.
Really?
Well, because they're a large board.
Interesting, yeah.
They have about 500,000 enrollees now.
Okay.
So does the nursing board cover the remainder of the fee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so their participants pay 25 and the board pays the balance. But 3 of our boards require the participant to pay the full fee. And the medical board in their legislation requires them to pay the full fee when their program starts back up again. So that's I mean, there are options if the board wants to look at that. Interesting too, the physician assistant board charges a lower fee if they self-refer and a higher fee if they're board referred. So they have an advantage if they self-refer.
So, and I want to just be clear, so if you have a participant who relapses, and so you said that would kick them out of your program, but you do notify the board?
No, if they relapse, we keep them in the program, usually send them back into treatment and continue working with them to get back on track.
But you may be able to tell them to stop practicing.
Yes.
So you wouldn't, the kicking out is not automatic, but they would tell them, if you want to stay in this program, you need to stop practicing until we tell you otherwise.
Yes.
And how do you know that they follow your recommendation?
We don't have a firm way to know that. The nursing board has their license placed into inactive status, and so we know that an employer can't hire them because they're inactive. But for the other boards, we don't know that. There's really no way if they quietly want to go somewhere else.
You may not know this, but do you know how many registered nurses there are and how many licensees that the Board of Nursing has?
About 500,000. I think they're just under 500,000.
Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, lots and lots. And then I did a quick little math, and if it's $380 a month, that's about $13,680 for the 3 years. But it looks like we end up paying $18,000. Is it because? I mean, is that because most of our cases go longer than 3 years, or?
No. No, I don't know how to answer that because there's no difference in the fee. I'm not sure.
So we don't pay 16, then we pay a little
So
less.
this 380 is the administrative fee, but there's more than that you charge? Or is that the total?
That's what we charge.
Okay.
The administrative
And
fee
then-
for all participants is the same.
And then the licensee pays $2,000 upfront for that fee,
Right.
and then we pay the rest. I don't
Right.
think it's 16. But-
Pulled it from what budget said.
So probably they go longer. I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Right
It's just
now.
that our, maybe ours would average more.
And because our current participant is actually in there, has been there for longer than 3 years, right?
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
why, yeah. Great.
Okay, we move on. We're almost done. The participants agree to cooperate with the program, but it's in the statute that failure to comply with the contract, with the agreement that we make with them may result in termination of the participation in the program. In that case, they would be referred back to the board for further action. But it does give us a little bit of authority and power behind our agreement. Go ahead. The members are appointed by the board. 3 members of the committee shall constitute a quorum. We're currently working with 3 members right now on that committee, and I know you're going to look at some applications. The committee shall have the following compositions: 3 veterinarians, 2 public members. So there's a total of 5, but we currently have 3 on the committee, and it's a really strong committee. They have lots of experience, and they work well together. And each person shall have the experience or knowledge in the evaluation and management of substance use disorder. Go ahead. So I put up the duties. This is all right from the statute, but I thought it was helpful for you to know that too. So their responsibilities are to evaluate them. So we've done all of that assessment process, and then they come to the committee and they use what we have to evaluate where the individual is in their substance use and in their recovery. And they consider the recommendations and the person's individual discussion. And they look at treatment facilities. So we'll recommend or work with participants to find treatment facilities, and then the committee can approve or not. Usually that's a 1-to-1 thing. So someone's getting ready to go into treatment, it's usually right when they come into the program, and we'll contact one committee member. Again, we can't get a quorum vote over the phone because of the Bagley-Keene rules, so we work with one at a time. And receive and review information concerning the individuals participating in the program. Go ahead. They call the meetings as necessary. We meet 3 times a year. Excuse me, we could meet more frequently than that if we needed to. It would just need a 10-day advance notice for the Meeting Act requirements. Consider each case and whether they may safely continue and resume practicing. Have their agreement in writing. We do that, but the committee also signs. We have an additional agreement they're handed in the committee meeting that has the basics of their recovery agreement that they sign and the committee member signs, and then we generate a more formal, more complete agreement within 10 days. And then it's required to do 2 meetings a year, but we do 3. That's it. Any other questions for me?
I have one. So members, as you're aware, one of our public members, Judson Johnson, is up for reappointment. And there's not a requirement to interview him. And you guys can vote to reappoint him today. I would just ask for your feedback on your thoughts on Judson Johnson being reappointed.
Wow, I didn't expect to be put on the spot.
Sorry.
He's a very strong committee member. He's participating in the meetings. He gives excellent feedback to our participant. There was an issue of concern, and he had a very professional, compassionate, and strong response to deal with it, which is all the things you want in a committee member. So, yeah, I would recommend him for reappointment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry I ran over my 15 minutes.
That's right.
We were asking questions.
Yes.
This is usually a 2-hour
Yeah.
presentation. I cut it down. Thank you, though.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead. Thank you very much for your presentation and for joining us. We'll go ahead to item number 14 on the agenda, interviews, discussion, and possible appointment to fill vacant diversion evaluation committee positions.
So we could go through, we have a memo just briefly going over, but I think the presentation was helpful so you guys have an understanding of what this committee is and the role of the committee members. So I think that we could go with in the order. Mr. Dumont, if you would like to come forward. Members, you were given interview questions. And so if you'd like, we can just do round robin and take questions. And then any other questions that you'd like. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I'd like to first start with having you introduce yourself and just briefly explain your interest into this committee and why you feel you're qualified.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Clayton Dumont. The reason I'm interested in this committee is because I want to find ways to further help others. About 4 years ago, I was working in an indigent legal field, helping clients getting evicted. I was very depressed working in this field. I found myself abusing alcohol and narcotics as well. And then I transitioned into the Bay Area. I sought treatment. I now work in a veterinary hospital, and I also work as a house manager for a sober living environment for men. And I'm very happy now. And I found that as far as my soul's concerned, it's good to help others, and I'm just trying to find ways to continue to do that and develop further experience. And that's why I'd like to be here today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for being here today. And you answered this, but I'll ask anyway. Why are you interested in this position?
Just to help others and also to develop further experience in the field.
Thanks. So the board is mandated in statute to give consideration to appointees who have recovered from impairment or have knowledge and expertise in the management of impairment. And you've kind of already touched on this, but a little bit more if you could, how do you feel your education and experience have prepared you for this position?
I'm currently enrolled at the Community College in San Francisco in the Addiction Studies program, so I'm still taking classes and working on the associates that they offer there. And then for the last year and 4 months, I've been working directly with addicts. I do live in with them. I see them every day. So.
Thank you for your interest and for joining us today. I'll ask this question. Is there any reason of which you are aware that would prevent you from completing your duties as a member of the DEC?
No.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like to share with our board?
I think I covered the parts I wanted to mention. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
I just had another question. I'm sorry. What led you into becoming a veterinary assistant? Like, what was that transition like? What did that lead to?
I had a friend who worked for the SPCA in San Francisco, and he told me about what he did. And I was just looking at jobs, trying to figure out what would be something that would be enjoyable in life to do. And I saw an application for the hospital where I currently work, and I called them and I talked to them and asked about the day-to-day, what they were interested in, and I actually just started cleaning there, and then they've transitioned me, and now I get to do all sorts of outpatient treatments, inpatient treatments, and things. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're not practicing law right now at all?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And do you have pets?
I have one cat,
Okay.
kind of. He's adopted me.
Cats are.
So.
No one really
cats
has
do.
cats. They have us.
So congratulations on your recovery and what you're doing. I think it's great. And it sounds like you do have some idea of what veterinarians are going through because you've been working there. I know it's in here, I'm sorry, but how long have you been in?
March 2017.
Okay. And it sounds like you're finding a lot of joy in helping animals and the people.
I absolutely love waking up in the morning knowing I get to go to work and play with
that's
animals.
great.
So.
Are you planning on staying as a house manager?
At least for now. They've offered to try to transition me into more outpatient work, where I'd work in their office and run more groups. So there's room for growth there. It really just kind of depends what I'm interested in as well, so.
Great. Well, congratulations on your recovery.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming today.
Thank you. So members, before we jump into the veterinary professionals who are up, we could entertain a motion to appoint your public members at this time. So you could do, if you would like, to reappoint Justin Johnson and potentially appoint Mr. Dumont.
All of these members are up, or the two public?
There's two public member spots. One is currently up for reappointment. The other one is completely vacant.
Perfect. I would move to reappoint our current member, Justin, and to appoint, what do you call it? I'm sorry,
Clayton
Clayton.
Dumont.
Sorry, I'm spacing out here. Yes. To the DEC, to the two public member slots for DEC.
And I second that.
Any public comment or further board discussion? Call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank
Congratulations.
you, welcome.
Okay, so we can move on to, before we call, there's two members who are going to be participating in the interview via the phone. I believe the only other, we have just Dr. Druces here in person. So Dr. Druces, if you wouldn't mind coming up and we can get started with you. And this time I won't steal the thunder and ask why he's interested, but I will ask you to introduce yourself.
Alan, excuse me, Alan Druces, licensee 8330. I actually, if we look at the requirements verbatim, I probably would not qualify. I have not been in any kind of drug or alcohol treatment program. I've never been administered a breathalyzer on the side of the freeway, but I do have some experience with employees at the Riverside County Department of Animal Services, especially in the most recent past. We had one RVT that was diverting drugs. She was fired. I have, in the last 6 months, two veterinary assistants, one of which I tried for a year to get into a county program to help her out. She was, and you spoke of the mental health aspects of this. My experience with our employees is that the mental health aspect is a primary motivator, if you will, or reason why a lot of, at least our employees, may be abusing drugs and alcohol to soften the impacts of work, frankly. I mean, we speak of compassion fatigue all the time in the county, but the manifestation of that with these employees was drug use, was alcohol use. One VA had her license taken by the DMV, and the others suffered deep anxiety and suicidal tendencies. And for this reason, as the director, I would view this also as a learning experience for myself, to be able to help our employees and perhaps guide the county of Riverside into doing more. Like most everybody here, I guess, I was unaware of this program, having been licensed here for 40 years, and I think it's a great thing. And I do have a meeting with the head of HR for the county next week to go over just my frustrations in not being able to help these employees and keep them alive, essentially.
So you want to start with the first question down there?
Where are you looking?
In any of you?
Here, you're next.
Okay. All right, so I feel like he's answered number one. Thank you. While you're interested in the position, you've sort of answered number two, which is how you feel your education experience prepared you for this position. I see that you've lived all over the world and have a very interesting history. Do you have anything else in your education and experience that would help you with this position?
Not really, frankly. My times overseas where I was a student, and my wife and I, and now our granddaughters, we still travel quite a bit, but it's all for fun.
Well, in fairness to the applicants, I think we have to stick to script.
Yeah.
They have to be asked the exact same question.
Oh.
Or else Tara gets upset.
I'm sorry, do you want me to ask it in the proper wording? Is that true?
But I think you've already done number
Okay.
two, but I'm just scolding you. Is there any reason of which you are aware that would prevent you from completing your duties as a member of the DEC?
No, frankly, I was looking to retire last spring, and I was asked to stay on and lead the department for at least another year. I intend to honor that obligation, and even if I was to retire in the spring of 2020, I would look forward to ongoing participation in the committee, because I still want to give something back to the profession.
Some people in our community don't know how to retire.
I walked away from equine practice. I hope to walk away from the public health and shelter medicine.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the board regarding this position?
I think this is a very important issue and a very important topic for the board and society to be addressing and more intensively understanding the reasons and developing processes to help these impaired individuals.
Thank you.
Okay.
She's still learning the rules.
So members, we're going to call the other individuals by phone right now.
Question for you. I have two members here. Dr. Samuel Park, can we hear in person?
Sure.
Park.
Oh, he's doing this one? Oh. We'll do this one and we have one more. Park.
Who's he calling?
Samuel Park.
Here, can I look at this?
Hi, is this Dr. Park? Hi. Dr. Park?
I'm sorry about that. Hello.
Hello. This is the California Veterinary Medical Board. And thank you. So we are here with our 8 members on the Veterinary Medical Board. I'm sorry, just 7. One is absent today. So thank you for your time and for your interest on this committee. Our board members have some questions prepared, but we would like you to first introduce yourself, and then we will start with the questions.
Of course. Well, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Samuel Park. I've been practicing in California for almost 10 years. Practice. I love the practice of veterinary medicine, especially in the general practitioner perspective. Because we get to dabble in, all fields of medicine and surgery. I'm a very hard worker. I've been working hard. It was just something ethic that's been instilled in me from my younger days by my parents. I saw my parents working hard growing up, so it's something that I like to shy away from. I'm always up for the challenge as well. A reason that I particularly found interest in the Diversion Evaluation Committee is, I work a lot with them. Especially with the LAPD Rescue Act. And, they bring in pets that, it's really their last string, their last chance, and, they come in and, we make them better, we rehabilitate them, and then we rehome them. And, I know the Diversion Evaluation Committee, one of the main purposes is to kind of help, professional staff get, back on their feet, I like helping animals. I'm just as fun with helping people. I like helping people become better people. I like helping sick animals become better animals. And, I think there's a parallel kind of road and philosophy that could be applied. So, this is something that really interests me. And I thank everyone for the opportunity. Thank you for letting me have a moment to introduce myself. And if there's any other questions, please feel free to just ask at your convenience.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to our board members to ask some questions.
Of course.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I think you've really covered some of this, but you might want to, the first question is, why are you basically interested in this position? And I think you sort of covered it, but you might have some other, there might be some other things in your background or resume that you'd like to point out.
Sure. So, another reason why I'm particularly interested in the Diversion Evaluation Committee is also because, being a veterinarian, working in a busy hospital, our hospital is very busy. I've seen what this type of workload can do to people, and it's not just our hospital that's busy. It's, a common scenario that I've seen, I've discussed with other colleagues, and that's just kind of the nature of veterinary medicine, long hours, and I've seen the toll that it takes on people. People get into the vast majority of people get into the veterinary medicine world because they're passionate about helping animals, making them better, and I've seen a lot of that passion fade away in people that, they work a lot, they have bills to pay too, and I understand that, but I've seen this whole concept of compassion fatigue. I've seen what it does. I've seen, I think that stress plus long hours creates an atmosphere for technicians, support staff, for veterinarians. It really makes it a little bit easier for them to delve into substance abuse. You take, for example, a veterinarian who's done 4 years undergrad, 4 years grad, possibly even a year of internship, and then 3 years residency. Start experimenting or delving into the world of substance abuse. I just think it would be such a shame for all that education, all that potential just to kind of go down the drain because, they opened up the door to something, and the door was kicked open by substance abuse. So, I really feel like this would be a good way for a lot of these veterinarians for us to kind of focus on their rehabilitation and making them functional contributors to the veterinary world again, and I really feel like I could be a good contributor in helping a lot of these professionals get back on track.
Thank you.
Okay, second question. The board is mandated in statute to give consideration to appointees who have recovered from impairment or who have knowledge and expertise in the management of impairment. So how do you feel your education and experience have prepared you for this position?
Okay, so growing up I grew up in Riverside. The city of Riverside is no stranger to substance abuse. I volunteered at numerous homeless shelters. I still work with a lot of homeless people at our hospital. They come in, they have pets, and unfortunately they don't have any money to pay for their bills, so I usually help them on a pro bono basis. But my experience in dealing with homeless people, with volunteering at homeless shelters, I also volunteer with the LAPD, and I've also witnessed what substance abuse can do to people, to society, to the city. So it's not something that I'm shy about. It's not something that I haven't been exposed to. It's something that I'm very familiar with, and something else that I'm not really proud of, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm sure you guys may already know is right when I graduated from vet school, 2008. Literally a week or two after I got my veterinary license, I got a DUI. And I went through the whole DUI program. I went through the DUI program. I did the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. I did the, Alcohol Anonymous. I did the classes. And that was able to successfully transform me from, a DUI, which was a serious lasting judgment that I had, to what I am today. And I'll never drink and drive again. I may have one or two drinks on a special occasion, but for the most part, that was my lesson learned. That I feel like if I was able to go through the system, I have some experience with it. I feel like I can share these things that encourage other people to do the same.
Thank you.
Is there any reason of which you are aware that would prevent you from completing your duties as a member of the DEC?
No. Fortunately, I have the flexibility to adjust my schedule to accommodate, the quarterly DEC meetings. When I saw that the meetings were quarterly, I thought, well, but I'm prepared to put as much time in that's needed. Aside from the mandated quarterly meetings. I really want to be active in this. I feel very passionate about it. So there's nothing in my schedule that would prevent me from performing my duties as a DEC board member.
Thank you. The last question, is there anything else you would like to share with the committee or board?
I spoke with Manil prior to our meeting today, and I'll just kind of reiterate what I told him. This is something I feel very passionate about. I really want to help RVTs, help vets, that have gone through this. I want to help them get back on their feet. I want them to rejoin our little veterinary bubble as contributing members again. I feel like, veterinarians in the U.S., we're a particular breed. I think we should really try our best to help each other, and, America, especially as a country, we're such a great country, and I just really feel like a lot of these vets and RVTs, that doesn't substance abuse, with the proper help and support, I think, everyone deserves a second chance, and, I just want to make sure, that I can do my best to help those that really need help.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Park. Right now, as you may be aware, we have 2 vacancies, and we have 4 people that we are interviewing for the veterinary positions. So after this meeting, we will follow up with you on the results of this meeting, okay?
Okay, thank you. I just want to say, thank you everyone for the time and the opportunity. I will work extremely hard as a board member if I am so appointed. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And if you require any other information or documentation, anything, please feel free to reach out to me at your convenience.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Well, I had a question for him, but.
Oh. I'm sorry. Okay, so we do have Dr. Sweetser here in person, so I'd ask that you come up to the table.
Right-handed people tend to get that. Okay, so I start?
So my name's Steve Sweetser. My license number is 5864. I didn't get much information before this. I didn't realize that we were having a formal interview, but I'm willing to answer all questions and explain who I am and why I'm interested. I just didn't get. I had lots of questions which I couldn't find out the answers to because for various reasons. And so anyway. Do you want me to start?
I'll start. Why are you interested in this position?
Well, basically I'm retired for a few years, and it just sounded interesting to me because I've always thought it would be nice to help the profession in some way now that I'm not working anymore. And the concept of substance abuse is particularly important just because of experience that I've had throughout my life between veterinarians I've worked for that have actually gotten in trouble with the board, and then family members that have had substance abuse problems, and friends that I've, through life and dealing with these issues, my original exposure to this is I learned how not to be a codependent because of their problems and what, as a friend or family member, how to deal with this. And so, but my experience isn't formal in that I haven't, had education that has to do with substance abuse or anything beyond just life experience. And so when I read the basic description of the committee, I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. And I, as the last veterinarian said, you do want to help people in the profession get back on track because it is we all know what a stress this profession is, and so basically it just sounded like an interesting concept, but I didn't get beyond that because I didn't get specifics about what was really needed, required and that sort of thing. But I'm still kind of interested in interviewing anyway. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, I'm supposed to read from this sheet.
Sure.
So the board is mandated in statute to give consideration to appointees who've recovered from impairment or who have knowledge and expertise in the management of impairment. I know that you mentioned your friends and family. This question says, how do you feel your education and experience have prepared you for this position? So perhaps you can just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, because I have actually been employed by veterinarians who've had their license taken away, and so I've been aware of how that affected things and what the process was and what they kind of went through. But then my main experience is just, I have a brother that had a serious, well, still does, a cocaine problem, and then I've had friends, like one particular friend had an amphetamine problem, and when you're actually kind of forced to deal with this, you learn stuff, basically, and you figure out what maybe helps and what doesn't, and how you can maybe be helpful, but then a lot of times you realize you can't be at all helpful just by not making it worse, by the whole concept of understanding codependency. And so, my experience is basically from life experience. That's the best I can say.
Thank you.
Is there any reason of which you are aware that would prevent you from completing your duties as a member of the DEC?
No, only that I don't know what the schedule is, because it's like, even though I'm retired, I do have certain things that are planned. And so it would be nice to know what, if there's a meeting schedule, what that is.
That they had 3 meetings a year.
Yeah, and it's quarterly, and it's also posted on our website.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I can't answer that question, but most likely I don't have a problem with it, only that I have one vacation planned at the end of February, and that's about it.
Yeah, they're pulling up our website that shows the meeting dates down there. So
The beginning of February.
those are examples of meeting
Oh,
dates.
yeah. No, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, that's the, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
in the past.
I didn't notice the years. Were they off?
This last year.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
19
'cause
and
February,
18.
yeah, I see. None of those.
But they
are
look like they're
valid.
early months.
Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with
No,
the board on this?
Only that all I really was exposed to was the initial email, because I tried to get more information, but wasn't successful. And it just sounded like something that, a way I could basically help. And so that's why I pursued it. And luckily, I was in town. I live in San Francisco. I was in town today, and so it worked out. Anyway, that's all.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Okay, members, we're going to call the one remaining member right now.
Hello?
Hi, is this Dr. Pop?
Yes.
Hi, this is the California Veterinary Medical Board. Thank you so much for your interest in the DEC. We have our 7 members here. One is absent today. We have a series of questions we would like to ask, but first I would just ask that you can introduce yourself to the board.
Hi, my name is Dr. Andrew Pop. I'm a general practitioner for Mansfield Veterinary Medicine. Graduated from Western in 2018. That's me. I live in Southern California.
Okay.
Okay, first question, why are you interested in this position?
I'm interested because throughout my undergrad and during vet school and stuff, I tried to participate in boards and things when I could. I was a student member on the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee for Sac State, my undergrad, and then during veterinary school, I was the student representative for the California Veterinary Medical Association, so on their legislative board, I would go and participate in that. And I don't know, I just have always been interested in kind of some of the behind the scenes sort of stuff, so I figured this was a good place to start.
Okay, thanks. The board is mandated in statute to give consideration to appointees who have recovered from impairment or who have knowledge and expertise in the management of impairment. How do you feel your education and experience have prepared you for this position?
So as far as like diversion control and stuff of that nature?
Yes.
Yeah, so I am a recent graduate, so we went through a lot of training, and like I said, I'm at Mansfield. I just
finished up my training and stuff with them, so I've gotten a lot of training on diversion control and how that, like, things are supposed to be logged and and everything regarding that nature. So it's still pretty fresh in my mind. So I believe that I can do a good job as far as continuing that.
Thank you. So is there any reason of which you are aware that would prevent you from completing your duties as a member of the DEC?
No, I don't think there's anything that would prevent me from performing my duties.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our board?
I'm really interested in the position. Like I said, like my undergrad was in Sacramento State. I've been up doing stuff with medical boards and things in Sacramento. I'm acquainted with the area. I'm just excited to kind of have an opportunity to kind of do a little bit more for the profession than just a general practitioner.
Dr. Pop, I would like to just interrupt, I'm sorry, to clarify, it's not just about diversion control. The specific statute requires that each person appointed to a diversion evaluation committee shall have experience or knowledge in the evaluation or management of persons who are impaired due to alcohol or drug abuse. So do you feel that you meet that requirement, and if so, how so?
I guess with that, in that wording, then no, unfortunately, I don't have a, like, strict kind of training in treating people with, like, that are either inebriated or intoxicated or something of that nature. No, I don't have a strict training in that.
Can I follow up? Yeah. Hi, thank you for applying for this position. I don't know that it has to be strict training, and you've been you're on the phone, so you haven't had the opportunity to see the other interviews. Is there any personal experiences that you may have had that have led you to care more about this than other things, or anything of that nature?
Yeah, so as far as that goes, I know that as far as drug use and things of that nature go, my wife's extended family members have had issues with that and have gone to like rehab and things of that nature. So I've seen them go through stuff of that nature, and there's been kind of, and I've seen some of the repercussions as far as even on my own family, or like I said, extended family members and stuff having to go through sort of treatments and stuff of that nature, and the stuff leading up to that, and everything of that nature. I've had experience in.
Thanks.
We asked the last one.
I think we're good.
All right, Dr. Pop, thank you so much for your time.
I have one more comment.
Sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Pop, I just wanted to thank you. I love my profession very much, and I'm always excited to hear and meet people who care about the profession as much as I do, and so keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I plan on it. However this turns out, I plan on trying to get myself out there instead of just being general practice and stuff of that nature, just trying to get more involved in our profession.
That's awesome.
That's what we need, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Pop, we have, just so you know, we have 4 candidates to consider and 2 vacancies. So we will make the appointments today, and we will get back to you shortly with the results of this meeting, okay?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Okay, I'd like to open up for discussion and/or public comment.
Can I nominate Dr. Juices and Dr. Sweetser?
Is that a motion?
Yep.
I second that motion.
Call for discussion. Any more discussion? Kathy?
Well, yeah, I also think Dr. Park has a very good background and seemed to be very caring in all of this as well. It's unfortunate that we only have 2 positions because he seems to have a lot of the background and the concern in his work with low-income communities and was very impressive to me on the phone and in his resume.
Right.
I would agree with Dr. Bowler. And also, the current veterinarians that we have, you're welcome, shout out. The current veterinarians that we have right now on the, where are they located? Or what is who do we have currently on the
we have
committee?
We have a Dr. Lane Johnson. He is on the committee. I don't know where he's located. Do you know? He's local. Yeah. And his term has not expired, so he's a current member.
I guess I was just looking at like locations and seeing, where, based on like where everyone can help, geography-wise, to spread it out.
Maybe we should do the votes one at a time.
I just wondered what you guys all thought about the different experiences, because nobody really has a personal experience here with substance abuse themselves, and I just didn't know, we just really didn't have much of a discussion, I guess. So why did you nominate those two? Can you?
I appreciated the enthusiasm of the other two applicants. I think that Dr. Drusi's and Dr. Sweetser's experience with actual substance abusers was a little bit more. The other two, although their enthusiasm is there and they really want to help out, I think that both Dr. Sweetser and Dr. Drusi really have seen it and have a lot of experience, even though none of them are recovering people. That doesn't negate their ability to do a good job. And I think that they've been through it. They've been through the life experience to know how difficult it can be to help out substance abusers. I think it's just that experience that's going to make them better members of the deck.
Jennifer. I wanted to point out that Dr. Park actually did have experience. He had a DUI, he said shortly after graduating, went through the DUI program, was affiliated with MAD AA, so he does have the experience. I do agree that all of them were very enthusiastic, but I think Dr. Park had the actual experience.
And I did hear him say that, but I didn't hear him say he was a recovering alcoholic, and I didn't hear his recovery date. So I question whether or not he really took, I don't know, but I would have liked to have heard that from him if he was going to share that with us.
Well, I guess I have a question of clarification. If you look at the quote from the section 4861, each person appointed to a diversion evaluation committee shall have experience or knowledge in the evaluation or management of persons who are impaired due to alcohol or drug abuse. Is that mandated? And if so, do these candidates qualify? That's not my question.
Well, so I saw that as well, and then I looked up the Business and Professions Code, 4861, and then what it says is that the board in making its appointments shall give consideration to recommendations of veterinarian associations and local veterinary societies, and shall consider, among others where appropriate, the appointment of veterinarians who have recovered from impairment or who have knowledge and expertise in the management of impairment. So I don't see it as a requirement, but it's shall. So I think it's something that we are to look at, and that's what was for me in regards to, until Dr. Samuel Park actually shared his story about the DUI, when I was listening to him, I thought more like, whoa, will you deal with people, folks that are unhoused that may have issues, but that's not veterinarians and that's not vet techs, and that's not what this committee is about. But it wasn't until really that he talked about his DUI that I saw the connection of why he was interested in this position. I think I'm torn because I hear with Dr. Nunez, not necessarily about his recovery, but about whether or not he is, if he understands this is for vets and vet techs. But I do appreciate his knowledge and where he comes from, particularly with underrepresented populations and coming from, also I appreciate that he's just like from Yorba Linda, not particularly Yorba Linda, but also just south. And so that there is a diversity in geography of folks that we are bringing to the committee. So it's not all concentrated up here up north, and that we have a better representation of veterinarians and vet techs throughout.
So just so you know, Dr. Drusi's is from Riverside, Southern California.
Christina?
So I think that the DUI experience, while is an experience, I agree, that didn't seem like that was the reason he was going into this. And I think he was actually concerned about the veterinarians in his practice and everything with Dr. Park. But I agree that it doesn't sound like that experience with the DUI really is what, like his experience and what he went through afterwards really changed him that much. It doesn't sound like that was like a pivotal thing, because I guess I would have expected that to have come up before we kind of pushed those questions. But I think I agree with your thinking, Dr. Nunez, about the life experience. And I think part of what we're looking for in the committee members will be their ability to identify people who aren't being truthful and are sort of kidding themselves or trying to, that's sort of a habit that, or not a habit, but a behavior that we see in addicts that I think life experience is going to really help with being able to identify that and then address that in a meaningful way. So I would support your nominations. Or
any other comments? I think I am actually agree with Diane as far as Dr. Park having personal experience that makes him. He did not indicate he was an alcoholic, but he did indicate that he has personal experience in the effects of alcohol abuse on veterinarians. So I thought that really made him, I think, more qualified. I do appreciate the fact that we have two candidates that actually took the effort and the time to come here, and I really feel like that is very important. And but I hesitate to. I really think Dr. Park has probably some of the best experience personally, and I think that is relevant.
Unfortunately, I have some personal experience with this in a close family member, and I think we need people that do have that life experience that can listen to that story that you're getting and realize it's all bullshit. That they can recognize that drug addicts are very good at making up stories, and drug addicts are very good at hiding their problem, and we need people to be able to see through that. Not somebody who just got a DUI as a one-off, but somebody who knows drug addiction when they see it.
Mark.
Yeah, I very much appreciated the enthusiasm of both Dr. Pop and Dr. Park. I told that to Dr. Pop, and I wanted to tell that to Dr. Park, but if he's still listening, keep up the good work. But when I was younger, I was able to be fooled a lot easier than I am now. I'm a wise old man now. And this business of substance abuse is not pretty. And I think people with experience are going to be better members of this committee. And so I definitely support the two nominations I put forward because of their experience.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, and I agree with what Mark said. I just wanted to say that I think the one thing that Dr. Park was very sort of eloquent about was seeing compassion fatigue and seeing the mental and the stress and the from an economic, from a workload that veterinary staff and veterinarians undergo day by day, and he had a lot of compassion for that. I think one of the things I would like to suggest is we have all of these individuals were really very, very good, and it would be great to at least notify everyone that we'd love to see them participate in other ways, even if they don't get on here. Dr. Pop He's had a lot of volunteer experience that clearly want to be involved in the profession in a lot of ways, and I'm hoping there's ways we can, encourage CVMA or whatever, however it would work to.
He could also be a subject matter expert, help
Yes.
with our law exam and enforcement
So
cases.
it would be great to reach out from the boards to thank them and encourage them to look into other things. Thank you.
Jennifer?
I would also like to point out that people who are potentially going to be entering this program need to feel that it's a safe and welcoming environment. So diversity among the committee would be welcoming. If everybody is of the same age bracket or of the same experience level, the work would not get done. So we do need to keep in mind that we need some diversity.
Okay, any other comments on, we do have a motion, anything from the public? Oh, Terry, yeah.
I just want to make sure the record is clear. Is it a motion to appoint Drusus and Sweetser? Great, thank you.
I believe so. Call for the vote.
Okay. Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
No.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
No.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
No.
So we have 4 yeses and 3 nos. Motion carries. Congratulations,
Excellent.
both of you.
Congratulations, thank you both very much. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at, well, I'm sorry, 15 minutes at 11 o'clock.
Item 15, update, discussion, and possible action on proposed regulations. In your packet, 15A has a status update on all the pending regulations. I'm going to turn it over to Tara. There's been a couple updates since the memo went out.
Okay, so on telemedicine, agency has reviewed that package, had a few proposed revisions which have been returned to staff. So that was October 9. So those are getting much closer to submission. That's the final rulemaking submission to OAL. And then on the substantially related criteria regarding criminal convictions, this is the AB 2138 package. That was approved by agency on October 2nd and returned to staff for submission of the final rulemaking package to OAL. Okay. So then now also we're going to need to add to our list that the uniform standards have been approved by the board yesterday for submission of the pre-review package to DCA, and the emergency fee increases were approved yesterday for submission for an emergency rulemaking package and general, I think it's really a certification to follow up on that emergency fee increase. That also needs to be prepared and submitted for pre-review to DCA.
Any questions for item 15A?
I have a question. Their final, in other words, the package must be approved by the OAL. Do they ever make those deadlines?
They do.
And do they ever exceed those or, actually finish things early?
They do. They do both. If they're not able to get back to us, they're fairly quick often. They get back to us, and then if we don't have enough time to respond or it has to come back to the board, then we can get an extension.
Could I ask something? With Amanda's change in jobs, where are we now in terms of who is doing these other than Tara? Because you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, so we can just skip down to management report under administration. That's where I was going to announce that. Amanda she's accepted a promotion opportunity at California Horse Racing Board. She is now their new manager, so we're really excited for her. and that opportunity. We are definitely going to miss her and all her hard work that she has done. We have posted the position. That position is a really tough one to fill. And it's also it's a tough one to retain because when you get really good people in that position, they're often poached by either other agencies. I've also seen it quite frequently, them being poached by the private sector. So that's kind of where we're at. Unfortunately, the candidate pool that we had in the time that it was posted is not ideal, so we're going to reopen it for more people because I don't want to rush to get someone in just to fill the seat. I want to make sure we get the right person. So it's going to reopen soon. With that, we will be working closely with DCA, Tara, and myself and Moniel to make sure that these are still moving forward in the process.
And hopefully you can apply a no poaching standard once you get that person.
For us or them?
No poaching from us.
Because I'm good with us poaching from other places.
Yes. Well, we should just put on record, Amanda did a very extraordinary job.
Absolutely.
With all of these packages, and her constant nudging the process along with the rest of the staff and Tara was, I think, really important. And it was very helpful, the display of this material for all of us board members to watch the process. It's amazing how long these take to make.
That's one wonder for it.
I don't want to sorry, I don't want to belabor it, but I agree. Amanda was great. So thank you, Amanda, if you're out there. Is there a way, like, are these positions, and we can maybe talk about this in another section, but are these positions things where they are up for raises, or is there any incentive for them to stay with us?
Yeah, so there's things that Moniel and I have talked about to make aware what the incentives are that this position does offer that other positions may not offer. For example, for this position, I feel like most of it is researching and writing, and you can do that anywhere. And so I feel like this is really an opportunity for telecommuting that a lot of, it's pretty rare in DCA to offer, and this is one of the positions that I feel like it's fitting for that position. That's a huge incentive, I think, for people to apply. Another incentive that we offer that not other programs do are alternate work schedules. So instead of the normal 8 to 5, we offer flexible schedules. There's 9-8-80. There's a 4-10 schedule that we offer, and that hasn't been really widely publicized. And so we're looking at ways to incentivize getting the right people and retaining these people, and also the free parking. So that's it. I mean, it might seem minor, but if you have an AGPA position somewhere else and we offer the same, but it's free parking, that could be a couple $100 savings. So we're looking at all the ways to incentivize this position.
Okay, any other comment? Public comment? Should I ask for public comment? Any public comment? Okay, we're ready to move on?
Okay, item 15B, members, you have in there a memo, and to summarize in a nutshell, I have requested, this was with budgets, and I requested to pull it back, mainly because we incorporated the Board of Pharmacy in our regulations, and for reasons outlined more in the memo, I believe it's more fitting to strike the Board of Pharmacy from the proposed rulemaking. Mainly, they are not currently going out to veterinary clinics and inspecting, and if they were, they have the standard to hold them to the USP standards, or they have the requirement to hold them to USP standards. I do not believe that it is appropriate to keep Board of Pharmacy in our regulations, so I would recommend removing that from the proposed regulations.
The only thing I would add is that Assembly Bill 973, as discussed in the memo, I just want to make a point of this, details that Board of Pharmacy enforces drug compounding over pharmacies and pharmacists, and does not extend that authority to veterinarians or veterinary premises. The board has its own drug compounding provision under the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act, so the board is properly authorized to enforce drug compounding in premises. In addition, other provisions of the Pharmacy Act provide the board, the Veterinary Medical Board, authority to enforce other drug laws against veterinarians and premises. So it is appropriate to go ahead and strike Section 2096. It's on page 5 of the proposed language. We're just going to strike that entirely, just to make sure that we're clear on who is going to be enforcing the drug compounding in premises under the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act.
Kathy?
I was going to make a motion to move to strike that, but before I do that, I wanted to ask, timing-wise, what does this do? Does striking this language now, does it have to be repackaged up and go back through? I'm a little unclear about.
So the initial statement of reasons and the proposed language need to be revised and resubmitted in the rulemaking. It'll come to me for review. I'll sign off on it, then it goes back to budget.
Okay, so it's not a big.
Yeah, it's not
doesn't
going
go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, it's not going back to step one. We just revise it and keep moving it forward.
Dr. Bradbury?
On page 4, is section 2095D, I think we have to remove the statement that says that the privilege shall not prevent review, veterinary premises, quality assurance program, and records maintained as part of the system by the board or the California State Board of Pharmacy. So I thought we just have to strike or the California State Board of Pharmacy to be consistent.
Oh, that's.
I don't know what the quality assurance program requires with respect to the Board of Pharmacy.
This is them.
Is Patty here? Patty might know what the inspections cover.
It seems like it's the same thing.
I don't.
I think you're right.
Based on my knowledge of what Board of Pharmacy does, when we met with Board of Pharmacy a few weeks ago, it was pretty clear that they are not going into veterinary clinics and doing any inspections.
Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and strike on, so I'm on page 4, subsection D of section 2095, line 5, where it says by the board or the California State Board of Pharmacy, we're going to strike or the California State Board of Pharmacy.
That's a good call.
So this went out for public comment, or it's not yet? No. It's still in budget. So was there any communication directly with the Board of Pharmacy about these changes?
Yes, actually, when we met, had an informal meeting with the interim executive officer of Board of Pharmacy with Dr. Sullivan, Jessica, and myself. We discussed, in fact, it was her idea to remove the Board of Pharmacy's enforcement in the drug compounding regulations.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Comments?
Want me to make the motion?
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to move to strike the last section of on page 5 of 2096, and in the addition to 2095 subsection D, the language we just struck, and you probably have to read your thing.
Yep, I'm going to add to your motion, and approve the regulatory, or the proposed regulatory changes as modified, direct the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, authorize the executive officer to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, adopt the proposed regulatory changes as modified.
I'll second.
Okay, any more comments or discussion? Comments or discussion from the public? Call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Would you like to keep rolling through 16? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
So agenda item 16, not much of an update. We provided most of the updates at the last board meeting. The remaining ones were items that had not been have updates since the last meeting. So AB 528 has been enrolled, and that was related to the Cures database. And what I put in red, I believe I put in the last one too, that the bill would allow the veterinarian to report the information required as soon as reasonably possible, but not more than 7 days after the data controlled substance is dispensed. That's already current law, so it's not changing, doesn't have a direct impact to veterinarians. We have AB 611 was also enrolled, and I believe that was recently signed by the governor as well. AB 202 is enrolled, and last I heard it hasn't been signed by the governor. I don't know if so it's with the governor right now, but has not been signed as of when I checked yesterday. And SB 627, we did receive an update at the teleconference from Lovingly Legally too, that the bill, after the board took it, support if amended, when we submitted our letter with requested amendments, shortly thereafter I got a call from the author's office letting me know that they are making it a 2-year bill, and they are open to working with us on amendments, and so we will continue to work with them on that. I'm anticipating there may be some comments from the public on that one, but if you have any questions related to the bills, please let me know.
Any discussion or comments from the board? Any public comment?
Of course.
Good morning. It's good to see you all again. I'm Susan Tibbin, and we appreciate this opportunity to clarify MCRSA, which was the blending of medical and adult use, and to underscore the intent of 627, which is the health and safety of animals. As sponsors of SB 627, we've drawn on our experience with medical cannabis via Senate Bill 215 since 1996. With the passage of Proposition 64 and the melding of medical and recreational cannabis, now known as MCRSA, and that was via Senate Bill 94, the exigencies of the marketplace precipitated an unsafe and unacceptable situation, and that is what led us to become sponsors of SB 627. The veterinarian client-patient relationship was just not being honored, and however well-intentioned, animals were at risk. I think we can all agree there's no recreational use of cannabis for animals. However, under the guidance of a veterinarian, we see easing of pain, prolonging of quality of life, and the amelioration of numerous conditions via appropriate medical cannabis. Medical veterinary cannabis belongs in a medical dispensary, which sets the state bar at very best practice and actually sets precedent for the whole country. We would be the first state to codify and make the distinction. The primary directive in an adult use cannabis dispensary is the selling of products for recreational use. The primary directive in a medical cannabis dispensary is to identify the most appropriate medical cannabis for the patient, caregiver, and condition. Although MCRSA, which is the Medicinal Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, is the umbrella for all cannabis, recreational and medical, there are distinct differences between what's called an A or an M license, adult use or medical license. And as such, 627, the sponsors and the author, respectfully but adamantly ask that you work with us to make sure that veterinary medical cannabis is available in medical cannabis dispensaries only. This would codify the veterinarian client-patient relationship, and it would place the health and safety of animals above the exigencies of the marketplace. The marketplace will follow, but it's up to us to set the bar. Thank you, and we welcome the opportunity to share our knowledge base, our experience, as well as clarification of MCRSA, which can be pretty confusing with the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. I wanted to clarify a few things. There were a number of amendments that were put that we were informed 2 minutes before we went into the committee that if all amendments weren't accepted, that they would kill the bill there. They would oppose the bill. So we accepted all the bills, all the amendments, some of which we disagreed with. Mostly concerning what Susan just spoke about. Our efforts to reach out to the different people that had objections and requested the amendments were thwarted. We wanted to have a discussion with the people to see if we could find some kind of common ground, explain our position, and understand what their position was so that we could at least understand why they were asking for these things. A very important thing that we need to bring right now, the bill as written right now, what Legislative Council did with the language, with those amendments, is baffling to me. I don't know how they came up with what they came up with. First and foremost, your request for research funding, we are 110% in favor of that. It was implied that by including animals as patients, that the research funding, because of the language in the statute, that because animals would be included as patients, that the research funding would be accessible to them. This board has requested that it specifically include animals, and yes, absolutely, let's do that. What Legislative Council did with it was one of the main reasons why we turned it into a 2-year bill, because they just didn't get it at all. Why they didn't just take the language that Tara put together and include it is beyond me. So we're going to work out those differences with Legislative Council. We've been giving the authority to discuss it with them and to give them, because we have considerably more experience on this topic than the author and their staff. So that we can fine-tune these and get the language a bit more accurate. That being said, we'd also like to invite the board and any other person who's interested in these amendments to approach us, because we may know a little bit more about this particular topic than the staff and the author, and that's why they kept us on as sponsors instead of being a self-sponsored bill. So the funding that you're talking about, as it's written right now, is wrong. The funding will be, the language that was proposed by this board will be included as we amend this bill and move forward. We just needed the additional year, although time is of the essence and we would love to see things happen today. It's more important that we get it done right. And so I just wanted to let the board know that the language that they see today is not the language that we will have moving forward. Thank you very much.
Questions? I wanted to just clarify, right as of now, as of today, you all are still supporters of the bill with the hope that you will work through the amendments going forward. Is that the status? Okay, but you're on support for the bill right now.
Let me say this. There is language that was put in when Legislative Council did the amendments. Some of that language restricts the research to only human use. That's completely wrong. That's not what we asked for. There's other language in there that's just antithetical, as Susan pointed out, with the adult use, and that is antithetical to the entire intent. The whole reason that we brought the bill up was because it's for the health and safety of the animals. This is medical cannabis, and to have it be sold in adult use, and to strike the language that would require a recommendation, it's just antithetical to the entire intent of the bill. And so we would hope that you would consider drafting language and letting the legislature know that it is medicinal use for animals, and it should be in a medical, in an M licensee only. Otherwise, you're back to negating the whole idea for a recommendation, and you're back to not only allowing veterinary products, cannabis products, which is what this bill would do. Currently, all veterinary products are illegal. This would allow veterinary cannabis products, but the way it's written right now, it would allow the market to dictate what those products are, rather than having the input from the medical community and the veterinary community to determine what these products would be and how they should be used. Rather, we're going back to the bud tender being and Dr. Google being the people that are doing the recommendation for the health and safety of the animal, and that's just not right. That was the reason we started this whole process to begin with. So having the recommendation is essential for a medical thing, for a medical product, cannabis product. There's been some confusion with a couple of the other amendments with the language, some misunderstandings on both sides, from the people that requested the amendments and from me. I don't understand the rationale behind some of the amendments. And I'd love to have that dialogue so that we can understand what the rationale is and perhaps get some clarification and some sort of common ground that we can reach for the safety rails that were taken away with some of these amendments. Thank you very much.
I also just wanted to add too, other than the amendments for research, there were concerns about the intent of requiring the board to consult with CMCR since they had not done any research with animals and cannabis. And so when I spoke with the author's office, they are very much open to looking at that requirement to see who would be beneficial for us to consult with. So they're open to any ideas. It was not strictly just for CMCR. They're willing to work with us on that as well.
That's right, and that language, as I understand it, is being struck at your request, and we are currently looking into a more global, where there have been veterinary clinical trials that have been conducted, and we want to bring those to the fore as well.
Okay. What's the location of the bill right now? I can't remember anymore.
I believe it was held in the Assembly Appropriations.
That's where that's true. That's where it was. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
Can I ask a question about
Okay,
that? Just-
next we'll go on with the president's report. No.
I just had one question. So when we get the updated amendments that we want to put forth, is that, I don't even know what the new amendments are.
Nobody does.
Yeah, so will we just be updated on that information as it comes?
Yeah,
or-
of course. As soon as, right now, we're getting through the end of this session, so shortly after the new amendments are there, I'll definitely keep you posted. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and give a president's report. Since the July 17th and 18th meeting, I've had one hand surgery and the next one is coming shortly, so my typing skills and my writing skills are going to make this a little difficult. I can hardly read my notes, but it has been fairly busy, but I've had great help. I think both the vice president and our EO have been very helpful in going to certain meetings I wasn't able to attend, et cetera. I do participate in the AUS committee. That's the judicious use of antimicrobial drugs. I'm on that subcommittee with the CDFA, and we did a webinar on September 11th. We all contributed or were a part of the meeting on September 12th, our tele meeting. Cheryl attended, Dr. Waterhouse attended the pharmacy board subcommittee along with Jessica on September 24th. On the 26th through the 29th, we went as a group to the AAVSB meeting in St. Louis. It was the first time I'd ever been to that meeting. I wasn't sure what to expect, and it really wasn't at all what I expected it to be like. But I guess from the standpoint of, I felt that the presentations and the speakers were very knowledgeable and they were very passionate, but they were very one-sided, and there wasn't a lot of time for questions and a lot of time for, I think, a good dialogue. And some of the issues that were talked about, telemedicine was one, corporate medicine's involvement in veterinary medicine was the other, and the presentations, though very, very good, were, I felt, not congruent with the kind of discussion we need to have on these matters. I think we're all colleagues in this profession. I think that's a very important part of our profession. Both of these issues are important, and we need to be able to talk frankly and have a very animated discussion. My colleagues might disagree with me, but I was sort of surprised. I thought it would be more of a interactive discussion that was very focused on regulatory issues. Wasn't what it turned out to be, in my opinion. For instance, they brought over several very passionate and qualified young people from the UK that have started a business several years ago called Vet AI, Artificial Intelligence. That was founded by a couple of MBAs, and they gave a very interesting presentation, but as they were talking about what's going on in the UK, I was concerned because I have a lot of friendships in the UK. They referred to a report that had just been published a year ago by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and that report I thought was misrepresented. So I'm not sure what I didn't know where to go from that, and I was a little surprised. I thought that I think we do need to have more involvement in the AAVSB. I think I think diligently approached encouraging more involvement. We had Dr. Nunez run for a position on their director's board, and unfortunately he was not selected. I think that Ms. Bowler is very actively involved in a portion of that, but I think that,
Dr. Sullivan.
and Dr. Sullivan as well, but I just think that if we, I think we really need to be more active and more present. I think, but again, it was my first meeting, and so and you're involved as well. Yeah, so I guess I was surprised at the meeting. Anyway, enough of that. That was, we did though have a very nice time. Met a lot of colleagues and learned a lot about what other states do and don't do. We found out some states actually interview every licensee applicant personally, which I thought was remarkable. So anyway, a lot of people do things very differently. There was a really good session where we talked about special cases, different discipline cases, and then we had breakout sessions discussing what would your board do, and that was really enlightening too. I think some boards are very, very focused on different details than we are, and so that was a good thing to learn. Okay. On October 4th, Jessica went ahead and went to the Board of Governors meeting, and I can let her expand on that. And then we did, as an executive committee, have a meeting, phone meeting on 10/7. But that's all I have to say. I'd like to open it up, though, to the other members that participated in some of these meetings, and also what their insights are. Mark and Kathy.
Having attended the AAVSP meeting, I wholeheartedly agree with your assessment of the meeting, especially on their positions on telemedicine and corporate practice. And I do intend to run next year if there's a position available. We did learn that there was a territory in Canada that had 12 disciplinary cases a year that they had to deal with. 12
complaints. Complaints.
We all wept when we heard that.
Do you think we should, as a board, write a letter to AAVSB encouraging them to present more both sides of a controversial subject or any subject?
Yeah, I'm open to that. I felt a little, I was, as you all know that were with me, a little bit concerned when I came home. But I also felt like it was the first time I'd gone to this meeting. I had no idea if this was a correct representation of the meeting. I know some other people have a lot more experience. And so I wonder if maybe not writing a letter, but maybe me actually reaching out to the leadership and having a dialogue would be a good idea. Sometimes dialogues are a good idea. So I do really want to do that and to actually inquire and have a conversation about that, because I did hear from other attendees that, in their opinion, this wasn't the first time things had been fairly one-sided and maybe not as regulatory medicine oriented as they could have been. So, Kathy?
Yeah, I tend to agree. This is the third conference that I've been to since I've been on the board, and they have varied. This one I felt was probably not quite as good and robust as the last, that I took a lot less away from it. I do think that, I think a dialogue would be helpful, because I think we heard it from a lot of attendees, and I don't know who picks their speakers, if it's staff-driven or board-driven, but it would be, they seem to have a lot of vendors making presentations, which is helpful, but there really needs to be the other side, and I think, or at least a working dialogue within, and these were more presentations to the body with questions. So it wasn't quite as interactive as I think we've had before. It's very interesting to go to these things, because it's the province, it's Canadian provinces and U.S., and not all U.S. states attend. I think Illinois has never been there, which is quite interesting for me, a pretty large state. But the California presence is so overwhelming for every other province, including, the entire country of Canada, because our numbers of licensees, the applicants, is so dramatically huge compared to the rest of these states, and it's very interesting to see the way they look at regulation and how it works within each state is quite different. But I thought this year was very helpful to have a lot of our presence there, and I've been enjoying I'm on a member services subcommittee or task force for the AAVSB as a part of my representation on ICVA, and that is useful too, because I'm learning a lot more of the ins and outs. It's an association like any other, and it has its limitations, but it's a very good collaborative place when you get together. One thing I'll just quickly say on the ICVA for the professionals in the audience or listening is the NAVLE exam that's given this December, our winter exam, will be the first one with a fully recoded exam based on the big practice survey, the new blueprint of clinical and all the rest of the changes that were derived from that survey that was done 2 years ago. So the recoding has been done, so the NAVLE, this will be the first cycle that it gets processed.
So, and I want to comment on that because I feel like there's so much potential there, and there's so many initiatives that are getting started that have been going that have so much potential to be very helpful to the profession as a whole and regulatory medicine. And I think that it's easy to criticize from the outside, so I think that we're on the right track as far as getting more involved. I think that's the answer to concerns that we might have is increasing our involvement. Yes, Dr. Newman.
And we took a very nice picture with the arch in the background, and we took a tour of the Budweiser plant. Kathy enjoyed the Clydesdales very much.
King wanted to come home with me, but my husband wouldn't let him. Anyway, but it was very useful, and I think it does a good job for our profession in California for that presence, because seeing what's going on nationwide is very important to what we deal with day to day as a board here. And I think from a staff perspective, Jessica's also on a subcommittee of executive officers. I forget the name of it, but is quite involved, and all of that is critical for the better functioning of this board.
I agree. So a couple things I wanted to add. First, to clarify that while we are becoming more involved, it's not additional costs to the board. It's all paid for by AAVSB. Just to let everybody know that. That's including meals and travel and everything. It's all part of that. The board is not paying for that. So this is the second AAVSB meeting that I've attended. I do echo the concerns that were raised regarding some of the presentations. First, I do want to say that the first day, they had a full day dedicated, a separate session from what the board members attended for the executive directors. I'm on the one of the committees for the executive directors that helps kind of facilitate the conversations and talk about the best practices. And I think that day was incredibly helpful for not only myself but also the other attendees in the room. We want to really make sure that we're learning from the best practices and what AAVSB can do to help us streamline any process. I think it was very valuable, but I am recommending that those meetings happen more frequently, not necessarily in person, but I think we need to work together to have more teleconferences to really learn from each other. The numbers are staggering from state to state as far as workload. There's just no state that even comes remotely close to our workload. There were comments made from other states that although there's executive directors in the room who oversee multiple professions, when you take the sheer numbers, even combined, all the professions they oversee doesn't even come close to our numbers. And so some things that they do just seem completely inefficient to me, because I can't imagine us having the board members interview every single applicant before you license them, and they do that during board meetings. So imagine the delay that would cause. They also are involved in every single complaint and investigate every complaint. They get a handful a year, so to us it sounds insane. But I think just hearing the different viewpoints is also, I think, interesting too, and a little concern for me is what people consider discipline varies from state to state. So some boards might be saying if they do like a notice of warning, so we would refer to that like maybe an educational letter. We don't disclose that information. There's some boards who do, and so they might select that there's been discipline. Well, that's a concern for me because we're being told that it's discipline, but depending on what happens, we wouldn't actually consider that discipline. And so the bigger concern that I have is the reporting to the Vault Viva database. First of all, only 50% of the states are reporting to that, which is a concern for me, because if we're relying on that information, they only have half the states reporting. It's not really great for us, for consumers. But also, if even increasing that, even if we had all states, if we're all reporting different stuff, that's a concern as well. So I'm committed to making sure that we're comparing apples to apples, and also I've also told the ASBSB that I'm very much interested in, I told them I will personally contact each state EO and tell them why they need to report to this. They're also looking, and a lot of the responses that they tell me when they some kickback that they, and I'm sure Kathy has heard it too, that they have said they don't have the resources to report the information. So one thing that we're working with AVSB is to build an interface with their system. And so that would work both ways, to where their system would send us the information. If anyone was disciplined or if they have license information, they would send it to us. We would also send information to them if we take discipline on someone. Their status would be automatically sent over to AAVSB, and there's no manual intervention. So this is something that we're working on right now with them, and they've mentioned it during AAVSB with everybody present to let them know that this is something that they're trying with us, and if it works with us, they're going to push it out to all the other states. And if we get that, I would have a lot more confidence in the Viva database right now. So those are things that we're working on. There's also things that they're offering. The racetrack program is something that they're doing. They're partnering with CE Broker to allow veterinarians to report their CE into this database. And the goal is to have the boards be able to use that database as an audit tool to audit for CE. Some concerns that I have expressed with them that they're committed to working on is the racetrack program right now only accepts, with CE Broker, it would only accept race-approved courses. Well, we have we have a statute that gives blanket authority for a number of organizations. They don't have to be race-approved. And so we would want that capability for veterinarians to use all of the CE in this tracking system. I had some concerns about data integrity that they're working with answering, who owns the data, what happens if something goes wrong. So I'm involved in all of that. I would like to have them come and give a presentation on this program, because I think we can get there. I don't think we're there right now, but I am involved with that. I'm going to see if they can come out in January to present on the capabilities that they're doing.
Can I just add one thing? Because
yeah,
in light of all of this, we're always cognizant of California's specific guarantees on privacy, data integrity, and security, and things like that. And obviously, would never anything we would be involved with and are involved with, we are constantly working with legal counsel, et cetera, to make sure that we are complying with all the because we have, and I'm proud of that in California, a lot of, I believe, more protections on a lot of levels than many other states do.
Well,
so we have
Canada
to be cognizant of that.
Yeah. Canada was in the same boat. All the Canadian provinces were very concerned and abstained from votes having to do with sharing privacy information. So any other comments, Mark?
I also thought it was interesting that they proposed a scholarship program that may allow our legal counsels to come along to the next meetings too.
Oh, yeah, I can tell you that.
So
yeah,
guess what, Tara?
She has free time.
One thing I also wanted to add about the one-sided presentations. I know you want a dialogue, and I support that. I think we should have dialogues. But I'm really concerned with how they presented, especially with the corporate practice presentation. And I spoke with Mark yesterday on that as well, because he was the one who presented. I think that with that that venue, with it being all association of regulatory boards, for you to present 45 minutes to the corporate practice without it mentioning anything about making sure the other side is heard, and also concerns and how it's good for consumers and regulatory boards. I have a lot of concerns with how it was presented. I think that it's really important that we don't all have to agree or see the same ways or have the same agendas, but it's really important for all the boards and all the attendees to hear both sides. And they did a 45-minute presentation for him, and they opened it up for questions, and then they said, well, we're kind of short on time, so if you have questions, it'll cut into your lunch, and you're welcome to stay. Most of us did stay. There were some questions.
Most of the questions were pushback questions.
It was very clear that
Many
there were
states.
a lot of people who were upset, and we weren't able to really get into that. He also made a point to call us out by name several times.
4 times.
And we also weren't given a chance to respond. So,
In fact, I got to throw in, they didn't take one of our questions, not one.
Right.
I was very upset about that.
So while I think a dialogue is good, I do think that a letter would be beneficial to put it on record that this is very concerning. And I know that a lot of people don't really care for California. But considering our volume and the things that we do, I think that we need to be heard.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if this is the nature of the presentations and the whole maybe conference is sponsored by various people and that's how they get the funding? Is that?
No, so the conference, everything is paid for by membership dues. So all the regulatory boards are paying for it, which is another concern.
Yeah, and we paid for not 1 or 2, but 4 people to fly over from the UK for a 1-hour presentation that was very...
By we mean AVSB, not this board.
AVSB, excuse me. And I thought that was inappropriate use of resources. Sorry. So I am going to reach out and call the new incoming president and have a discussion with him. And I guess I would ask that you allow me to do that before we make a motion or something to write a letter, okay? But I do think we need to just open up that dialogue. Okay, next on the... Next is the Jennifer's report, RVT.
Okay, so due to time constraints at our past 2 VMB meetings, I did not get to present my standing report, so it's lengthy. I apologize. I will try to catch everyone up as best as possible. So in January 2019, if anybody can remember back then, I did have 3 main topics that I reported on. The AAVSB had taken the issue of licensure for foreign graduates of veterinary technology program seriously. They had formally established the PAVE for Veterinary Education Equivalence Program, to which I was appointed for a 3-year term. So the update on that, there have been several meetings via telephone. This was the first time I was invited to the AAVSB annual meeting and conference, but I was unable to attend, so I did not attend the last in-person PAVE RVT meeting, but I have attended all of the other teleconferences, and I will keep you updated as to the progress that committee is making.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Can I get the dates of those meetings so I can add them to our sunset report?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Second issue.
And can I ask one more question about that? What progress have they made at this point?
They're in the information gathering stage, but they've created the committee, which was big progress. Because it was an informal subcommittee, and now it is officially PAVE for RVTs. Second issue was the California RVT exam. In January, we had discussed we were going to delay the research pending possible action on administration of the exam. So the update was in July 2019, after a thorough review of the exam, to determine reasonable and equitable fees and after reviewing statute, after the occupational analysis and the AAVSB analysis and input from stakeholders, the board believed that the current examination served as a barrier to licensure, so we disapproved the California RVT exam. It's gone. Win for the RVT communities. The third issue I reported on in January was an issue with the VTNE results and pass rates by schools being published. And if you remember, the reason this is important is because this information is helpful in helping students to choose an appropriate RBT program. So because of our staff turnover, I know Ethan Mathis was involved in this, so he was going to leave behind some contact information to try to obtain those results. So the update on that is I did check our website and I was able to find California RBT exam statistics for July through December 2018. Obviously, we're no longer administering that examination, but there were no VTNE results on our website or the AAVSB website as far as pass rates for schools. The information, there was some information from the AVMA in May of 2018, and it was basically on the basis of publicly available information, so I'm assuming those are the school websites. 15 RVT programs fell below a 50% pass rate, meaning the schools could be in danger of receiving an adverse accreditation status, so they could have their accreditation pulled if they didn't increase those pass rates. And there were 13 more programs who were just barely above that 50% range, meaning that they could also run the risk of having their accreditation pulled. 8 of those schools were California RVT schools. So this is a really important topic that we need to address. I did briefly visit websites of several RVT schools. I was not able to easily find current data, and one school had pass rates that they were reporting from 2013. So can we say if we have an update on getting these pass rates? I know it was difficult getting that information from the AAVSB.
Did you say 8 of those California programs fall below the
Yes.
50%, or were barely, they all fell below?
There were both categories, and of the 15 that were already below the 50%, I think 5 were from California, and of the 13 that were just barely above that, 3 were from California.
I can get that information before the next meeting.
Okay. And then as far as new business, I have mentioned this before, but NAVTA is ongoing with their veterinary nurse initiative, and the goal of that initiative is to standardize the credential for the RVT profession in terms of credentialing requirements and title and scope of practice, basically creating terminology that is easy for everyone to understand, registered veterinary nurse rather than registered veterinary technician. And the basis of that was that pet owners are demanding qualified veterinary nursing personnel, which leads to consumer protection and patient care. The initiative aligns with the VMB mission to protect consumers and animals by regulating licensees, promoting professional standards, and diligent enforcement of the Practice Act, because the general feeling is that there is a shortage of RVTs in California. Another issue that I have heard about is ongoing complaints regarding RVT applications being significantly delayed by our board. We have heard that there has been a significant amount of staff turnover. We are severely understaffed. And possibly the issue with Breeze is not allowing applicants to complete their initial applications. So people have complained that their attempts to call have failed. They're disconnected. Our voicemail is full. Phones are not answered. So there is a significant backlog, but this issue is creating another barrier to licensure. So obviously staffing is something that we have discussed. Also, at our meeting yesterday, a fee increase was approved that will not only double the biennial licensing renewal application fees for RVTs and DVMs, but require that RVTs pay the same amount for licensing as veterinarians, so $350 for RVTs to renew their license. It goes without saying that the salary of these two licensee categories are not comparable. The fee increase proposed by the board is neither reasonable nor equitable. Fees are a barrier to licensure. The fee increase proposal that was presented to the board was presented as the only resolution to our current budget crisis. I refuse to accept that this fee increase is the only resolution without the opportunity to explore other options. Many reasons for the budgetary crisis were given, including increased fees from the AG's office. The board staff is bound by policy. Their hands are tied. Ours are not. Members of the VMB should be reminded that we have the authority to empower staff to explore alternatives. The system is riddled with inefficiency that impacts consumers, and it is irresponsible of our board to fail to address these issues. We have options that range from our executive team conferring with DCA leadership to possibly appealing to the Little Hoover Commission, whose mission is to investigate state government operations and policy, make recommendations to the governor and legislature to promote economy, efficiency, and improve service in state operations, and focus on how the state may improve outcomes of its programs, increase government transparency, reduce spending without sacrificing services, and eliminate duplicative or wasteful practices. I believe that if we all work together, the educated, caring, and well-intentioned members of this board and staff can explore some of the suggestions that were raised in public comment. Alternative resolutions may not be as easy as a quick fix of fee increases, but they will be more just. Although I do get the impression that this is an issue with more than just our board, we have an obligation to perform our due diligence in attempting to find an acceptable resolution and maintain transparency while doing so. We should not accept defeat until we are assured that this is indeed our only option. Those of us who attend meetings, veterinarians, RVTs, and public, and members of the profession are those of us who are financially able to pay our way or are compensated by associations, committees, and boards, along with the occasional attendee whose passion on specific issues motivate them to attend if at all possible. I would even be so bold as to refer to this group of attendees as the elite. However well-intentioned, we do not encounter the same obstacles as those we are charged to serve. The RVTs who are most impacted by fee increases, those who work hard, sometimes multiple jobs, and in many cases barely make ends meet, are simply not here to speak for themselves and are at the mercy of those of us fortunate enough to have resources to attend and be heard. Although it has been explained by myself and RVT attendees on multiple occasions that exorbitant fees will create a hardship, there is a continued belief from the board that this is not the case because RVT licensing fees should be covered by employers and not the RVTs and applicants themselves, and that this is common practice. In this scenario, I am badly outnumbered as the sole RVT member of this board. However, I am only a representative for the RVTs of California, and the true influence lies in the 9,243 RVT applicants. RVT licensees in California. I am reminded of a quote that states, "Inequity must be witnessed to be changed." One cannot truly grasp what they have not witnessed. Although I am confident that there will be a call to action from RVT associations all throughout the state asking to flood the VMB, the DCA, and the Senate committee with letters of opposition, I feel we should do something in the meantime. I would like to send out an environmental scan to the RVTs of California, asking for their feedback on standard practices regarding employers and hospitals covering their license fees, in addition to salary and job security. This is similar to surveys that have been sent out on other issues and can provide us with an accurate image of the average RVT. It is my hope that seeing these statistics will enable the VMB to truly understand the magnitude of this inequity and prevent further misconceptions. So to recap, we have a shortage of RVTs in California. There is no easily accessed data available on the VTNA pass rates in schools to help students choose a school. This is a barrier to licensure. If anyone is able to find and finish school, they then encounter issues with application processing, barrier to licensure. If and when a candidate gets through the application process, they are met with outrageous licensing and renewal fees, barrier. We need to keep in mind that we are a public agency and consumer protection is our focus. Creating unnecessary barriers to licensure is not the mission of this board. Any questions? Comments? The end.
I really like the idea of the environmental scan, the survey. I agree with most everything you said, Jennifer, and I understand it, and it's very painful, but I think I like the survey statistically to be able to help prove our point to the other areas, the other powers that be about the issues of the way the boards are funded and the fee licensing costs and things like that. I'm just not sure who would do that, and would that come from the board budget, or where would it come from? So anyway, it's an very interesting idea, I thought.
I love the idea of a survey, and just so you know that my hospital, which is a VCA hospital, does pay for the licensing of our RVTs, and we also have scholarship programs that pays for an individual to actually go through an RVT program to help them. They have to sign a certain
I agree, because it's a corporation.
To stay with us for
Come to the
while.
Inland Empire, that's not the case.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of the environmental scan. What I would request is to be able to work with you if you send the questions that you would like sent out. I will work with Solid, who has a contract with SurveyMonkey, and we can send it out the same way we did the environmental scan for our strategic planning. And we can make sure that it goes to every single RVT.
I like that idea. Christina?
I think that when we raised the fees, we actually raised the veterinary license fee to $500, so it's not equal anymore, but that's not, I understand your point. I also felt at the time of this presentation that we didn't have any other options, though I decided not to vote because I was so between we have to keep the board running versus my belief that we shouldn't be raising those fees. Jessica, can you explain what would have happened if we didn't raise the fees and didn't, I know that we're mandated, but what happens when we can't meet the budgetary requirements so that we have a better understanding?
So as shown, the fund itself goes negative. So we wouldn't be able to fulfill our mandate. We wouldn't be able to hire staff or pay for them. I've not seen how what happens to a board when they do go negative. If we go over our budget, I know it comes out of my salary, which might get you a day, if that, but
Jessica, can you confirm that you will not go to jail if we don't meet budget? Because we were told that at one point.
That I would go to jail?
Mm-hmm. That the executive officer would be thrown in jail if we didn't meet budget.
I don't believe that's in there. I'd have to double check with that government code.
But she's checking now.
But I do know it comes out of my salary. But again, that's only going to get you, I don't even think it'd get you a day, to be honest. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to function.
So if we couldn't function, I mean, the DCA has a responsibility to the consumers of the state, and things have gotten to a point where there's more, whatever has happened, where we're in this situation. And I know the legislature might sunset us. Is that what the term is when they tell you that your board is closed? I mean,
please don't jinx us.
I guess I'm trying to understand. I feel like these are sort of oh, here's a gun to your head. You have to do this, or else. And I don't know what the or else is, and so I don't know how we would be able to take more time than a 30-minute discussion with a couple of different budgets thrown in front of us in order to fix a problem like this in the future.
Is that an answer for you, or?
I don't have an answer.
Cheryl,
So it's always been my impression that the DCA is not there to run to the rescue.
No.
That they have no capability to fund us. They're not going to step in and give us
we
more
are
money.
100% special funded only by our licensees.
Yes. And what we've done in the past is to stop inspections. We stopped putting cases through as quickly as we had done before. So, but hospital inspections are one of the most important functions that we do.
Mark?
I've been around long enough to know what does happen when we don't have the budget. It basically results in a loss of staff and our inability to do the programs.
So I need to clarify, though, there's two things. There's a difference between the fund and a difference between the budget. So when you're in danger of going over the budget, that's where you lose your retired annuitants, you lose, you can't fill vacancies, you do emergency cost savings. But when you have no funding, you have no money to pay any bills to operate. So there's a difference, but that's what happens when you're close to your budget. But when you have no funds, you have nothing to pay.
Kathy?
Which basically just goes to an underlying problem across the board, unfortunately. One thing I was going to ask, I was thinking about the survey situation and what various veterinarians that have come before us in public or on the board have said about different practice activities. I'm wondering if a similar type survey or something could be sent to veterinarians, maybe through CVMA or some of the associations, about what they do and don't do for their RVTs in terms of assistance. I understand the corporate situations are very different than the small, sort of mom and pop veterinarians, but it might help to know what the problem is. Not that doesn't solve our underlying funding issues. It would just give us, again, more data to argue for a different funding mechanism or more assistance. I don't know.
Any other comments, any comments from the public after that report? I guess I would say that I feel very, very strongly, and I know that Jessica feels the same way, that one of our most important objectives is to take a look at how we spend money and to pay attention to the recommendations and insights that were given to us as far as how we use the AG, what cases we choose to discipline, how we go about disciplining them, how we use Breeze. I think we've already started down that road, and I think one of the problems is, we're not far enough along that road to see some of the monetary savings we would see. But it was probably it was the most painful vote that I've had to vote, and I feel very committed this next year to work with Jessica and the board and the staff to really not only be focused on how we spend money, but to be transparent about it as well. Christina.
Can you go back in your comments? You had mentioned another avenue to get funding. What was that?
It wasn't an avenue to get funding, but there were several things that were mentioned in public comment, several suggestions. We could push back to the AG's office. We could, I'm blanking on what they exactly were, but there's also, we could have our executive officer confer with DCA leadership. We could consult the Little Hoover Commission, which is a state, sort of a state agency that is basically committed to preventing unnecessary barriers to licensure, and they evaluate processes and try to reduce spending without reducing services. So I think the VMB needs to be proactive in trying to find some of these resolutions before it's taken out of our hands, because I can guarantee you at Senate committee, the RBTs will be there and they will be loud.
And I think there's an underlying sort of, not conflict, but yes, we have a responsibility to licensure and licensing and putting no additional barriers and processing licenses and being responsive and customer service and all of that, that's critical. But we also have a huge responsibility, and I think the bigger DCA one is to public protection. And so the things that the board does in terms of investigations and compliance and inspections and all the rest are so equally important. We're sort of in this, in this middle area here. And it's hard to, if you take away, if you lessen this, you're going to have to lessen this. And that's, I don't know how we do that.
So I think one of the biggest things that I have been doing and enforcement's been doing in the last year is to really work with identifying what steps could be eliminated, ways to do cost savings. And Dr. Miller had made the suggestion, which is what we are doing, is looking at the policies that we've done in enforcement and how we're investigating these. One of the biggest things that I think, a couple of the biggest things that will be cost savings in the long term. One of the I don't know if it was policy, but a normal thing when we had division investigations go out and do investigations for any kind of complaint, they automatically would have the inspectors go out with them. This oftentimes delayed investigations. It was very costly. DFI could be $250 an hour. Our inspection is $250 per inspection. So I'd be happy to present on the amount that has gone down as far as using DFI, because it's staggering. I think Rob, you met with DFI recently, and DFI made a comment about how little we're using them. And that's, to be clear, not because we're doing less investigations. We're not using them. We are using our inspectors because it's a lot more cost efficient. The inspectors have more training to know what to look for. And we are not using DFI to the extent that DFI was being used before.
Yeah, I believe in 2017-18 we used DFI. It was it was over 100 times throughout the year, request for service. And then in 18-19, it dropped down to 14 instances, which obviously cut it down by quite a bit. And then we haven't actually requested service this year yet from them.
And to be clear, that's not because we're not investigating.
Right.
It is because we have found a better way to investigate. And with that too, we are doing more complaint-driven inspections, less routine-driven, but we're looking at ways to still meet the 20% mandate, given our budget, while still being more efficient with our investigations. So that, I believe, will save us a lot of money in investigative services. When it comes to the Attorney General costs, there's a number of concerns that we've been identifying over the last year, and the process. Bless you. For example, one of the processes in place prior to the changes was to have our staff, when we got a complaint, we would send it over potentially to our to DFI with an inspector. Those then go to a subject matter expert. Then they would go to another subject matter expert. Then it would go to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office would then get mitigation, and then it would come back to us. I think that we needed to do more on our part before it goes to the Attorney General's office, because to pay them at their rates to get mitigation versus us getting mitigation saves a lot of money. We also are, when we send it over to the Attorney General's office, one thing we are doing is recommending stipulated settlements up front that we believe are according to the disciplinary guidelines. That also saves a lot of back and forth and delay. And that will also save a lot of money. These problems, I feel like, while it seems sudden, I think that there were lots of opportunities to see it ahead of time, but it takes a lot more time to undo it and to see it in the long term. I can't even explain how hard that was to say we had to raise fees, but I can 100% guarantee that I am committed to being more efficient and to lowering fees.
And Jessica, I do want to say too, we appreciate you. As I said in my report, your hands are tied. You're bound by policy. We're all wild cards up here. We can do more. We can direct you to do things on our behalf. You have rocked the boat and made very significant positive changes, and we do appreciate that. So I don't want anybody up here to think that I held ill will. It's just that we need to see in front of us what it is we're dealing with. One thing I've learned teaching is that if you can't teach it, you don't know it. If I cannot explain the reasoning behind this to the RVTs I'm going to have to answer to, then it's not the right answer. And that's my belief.
I would welcome the opportunity to join you on those conversations, to get out in front of this. I would love to present to any CARPTA meeting, and let you all know that we are here with you, and I want to solve it.
Kathy, and then maybe...
I thought the discussion yesterday was also very helpful, and a couple of things came up. And I know this is it's on the same subject, but on the way we have structured fees, licensing fees, that started a long time ago. It's been in place for a long time. But somebody brought a great example up of something we might want to look at to modify going further. And I know this is going to take some time, but the premises fee, a premises fee for one premises with one vet or two vets, it's a 2,000 square foot place versus a premises that is a 10,000 square foot place with 7 vets and da-da-da-da-da. The fee structure should probably be different for those and things like that, only because the inspections are long. Everything is bigger with a practice like that. And obviously the economy is much such that you would expect they could. So something, I don't know what that is, but maybe looking forward, we could look at some things like that. Go ahead, Tara, sorry.
I'm sorry, I think we have strayed from the agenda item slightly, so.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead then and close. We're going to take a lunch break, and we'll be back Thank you for your report, Jennifer, and we will be back at 1:30. Is that okay?